Hey, you all. This is the reading for today. It's called Mutt Genres and the Goal of FYC, First Year Composition. Can we help students write the genres of the university? Now, if you read this piece, you probably understood quite uh, quickly that she is talking to other teachers of first year composition and not necessarily to tutors. Still, there's a lot of interesting things in this article that I thought we should talk about relatively quickly. And I'm just going to give you a taster of the kind of thing that we might have been talking about in class. That is 5 to 7 minutes on a couple of key areas that might help you start thinking about the kind of work that we're going to do next. So, the reason I started with this article, and it should be clear, is that this next assignment, either singly or in groups, is going to ask you all to take on what is good writing in some particular area of the university. That is, some kind of major, some kind of minor, some kind of department or discipline. They're all going to have different styles of writing, and different important things will stand out to them in terms of like how people write, what values are inscribed in those genres that they use, and so on, and how students learn to master those genres. So that's one of the things that's kind of cool about this, is that it throws two terms at us that might be useful for our projects. One is this notion of genre, and two is this notion of transfer. Now, this is something that is key to tutoring generally and to mentoring, well, a little bit less. But certainly, those of you who are in tutoring spaces or saw a number of different kinds of writing from a number of different departments, students who are taking a number of different kinds of classes. We call those genres. When we call those genres, what we mean are semi-autonomous, relatively fixed genres that are stable for now, that fall into certain kinds of discourse patterns and have certain kinds of elements in common that are used for a variety of very socially appropriate purposes. So, what does that mean? Well, let's just imagine. Uh, you get into a car crash, let's just say, and you have to write a letter to your grandmother whose car it was. But then you also have to write an email to your crotchety biology professor who's going to be mad you missed a test. Now, you're not just using different media. That is, the written letter to your grandmother is on a piece of paper and the email is in Gmail. You're also, I get all these emails. You're also using different terminology. You could be using a different organizational strategy. You might have different purposes in mind, and the document might do different kinds of work. So a genre is just a way of saying those kinds of patterns appear in all kinds of discourse types, and we could start to organize those discourse types into categories. Now, the other thing that they're talking about is that Liz Wardle is talking about is transfer. And transfer is a notion that for any learning that occurs, a student is pulling on and using or remixing knowledge that he or she already had into new protean shapes. Now, what does that mean? You have never seen a particular kind of essay before. I give you a flarg essay to write. Well, once you see a flarg, you're going to start to pull on different kinds of writing that you've done in the past in order to cobble together your sense of what is going to need to happen in it. You might guess well, that is, you do it really well, and it ends up being a very successful flarg. Or you might guess poorly and you draw on all kinds of genres that you already knew how to do and make a really bad flarg. Again, there is negative transfer, there is positive transfer, but learning depends upon transfer. You are transferring knowledge from a former experience into a new experience. You are transferring your habits and your strategies for writing from something you know how to do to something you don't yet know how to do. So several key things might stand out to you here in doing this work. First off, one of the things that she starts with, and I'll just go very quickly to their website, is this notion from David Russell that in some senses a general course like freshman English, first year composition, is kind of like a course in general ball using. We never take a course in general ball using. Instead, we learn how to work with particular different kinds of balls, sports and other kinds that do certain kinds of things in certain contexts. Like Russell says here, the objective of general writing skills instruction is most often described as teaching students to write or to improve their writing, but there is no such thing as a general writing skill. If writing were an autonomous skill generalizable to all activity systems that use writing, improving writing in general would be a clear objective of an activity system. But writing does not exist apart from its uses, for it is a tool for accomplishing objectives beyond itself. The tool is continually transformed by its use into myriad and always changing genres. He continues, to try to teach students to improve their writing by taking a GWSI course, like FYC, is something like trying to teach people how to improve their ping pong, jacks, volleyball, basketball, field hockey, and so on by attending a course in general ball using. Such a course would of necessity have a problem of content. What kinds of games would you teach? Another problem would be rigor, because those who truly know how to play a particular game would look askance at the instruction such a course would provide. It would also be a problem of unrealistic expectations, since it would be impossible to teach all or even a few ball games in one course. Finally, he says it would be extremely difficult to evaluate the effectiveness of a course in general ball using, since one always evaluates the effectiveness of ball using within a particular game and not in general. So, crazy stuff that we've got here. We've got this notion, and it's backed up by all kinds of research in our field, that people never really write in general. Now, what's kind of interesting about that is that since that time, there has been some research to show that we do have general knowledge of some things. In this paragraph right here on page 769, you see several people pushing back on this idea and saying something to the effect of, listen, general knowledge can be very good at the beginning of a process, when you're a novice in a community of practice. Like Michael Carter says here, novices, because they are new to a knowledge domain, must rely on certain kinds of global strategies to act on whatever limited knowledge they possess about the domain. So, the question that she gets to right here, and that's one that's useful for us, is what general knowledge can we teach students about academic genres that will help them write in later courses? And how can we ensure that students will transfer that general knowledge at all and in helpful ways? The rest of the article is spent talking about the kinds of general writing skills instruction that appears in courses that she was observing as part of her research. But what we're doing then is we're moving toward a goal in which our tutoring would ask students to do certain kinds of work that would help them transfer those general ideas into more specific contexts. Like she says here, transfer works, that is, pedagogical methods that encourage transfer include things like explicitly abstracting principles from a situation, doing a whole bunch of self-reflection about what you're learning and how you're learning it, and finally, a generalized state of alertness that we often call mindfulness. So what we're really doing in this paper, this next project, which can take a number of different forms, is we're increasing our own mindfulness about the differences in writing that happens in different disciplines. As I've been saying for a while now, the writing in biology is not the same as the writing in history, and that's not the same as the writing in English, and it's not the same as the writing in business. Although it's all in English, right? You start to see differences as soon as you start to get more specific, and as soon as those students move past the realm of the novice. So what your goal is in this paper, and there's lots more things that we could talk about in this particular text, but what your goal is in this paper is to start to figure out, like she does here, what the genres look like in a particular domain. Now, what do I mean by a domain? Let's say, again, a department, a discipline, a major, a minor, a unit, anywhere we can establish that there's a discourse community using language in specific kinds of ways. Your first step, like I've started to put into the writing assignment itself, is to start to categorize the different kinds of genres that appear in that discourse community, in that domain. So I will ask you, let's just say in a week or maybe a little bit after, to take a look at the different kinds of discourse communities you've been involved in and uh, to work with other people to pick one that might be interesting for you to explore. There's going to be some primary research involved here, and it could be really fun. We're going to have to imagine what kinds of things we could do in order to do this remotely, that is, online. But it is very possible to do a wonderful job gathering secondary sources and actually interviewing people or gathering examples of writing from a particular discipline, a particular department, and then analyzing them in ways that I will give you in order that we reach conclusions about how we can be most effective with those kinds of writers. And that would be the essence of it, is that by the end you're writing a report saying, here's what I've learned, but then you're also writing a kind of a one-pager or a guide to writing in that discipline. I am really excited to see what you all are going to do. I think it's going to be fascinating. And over the next week or week and a half or so, we're going to settle into a groove here. I'm going to be all up to date on things that we've done in this class, and I'm going to ask you for your ideas about getting started with this project.